now in one of our newest sessions, our last session before we have a larger sort of session to talk about all of our presentations and how they all work together. Want to welcome Darren Riley, who is with Just Air and is a major figure in the environmental justice movement. Bear for a second, let me find a bit of information real quick, and we'll go ahead and get started. Let's see.
I can jump. You would jump in, Dr. Williams.
Yeah, no, I'm just real.
Okay.
Oh yeah, that's good. All right, thanks for your patience. We've had a good day so far, and I think we're going to culminate in a great presentation to conclude our session. I just wanted to make sure that I had information together on Darren and to be able to read and introduce to some who may not know of his work. Darren Riley is the founder and CEO of Just Air, Detroit-based environmental tech organization dedicated to protecting the 20,000 breaths we all take every day. Darren was in his mid-20s when he developed asthma while living in Southwest Detroit, which made him more aware of the environmental health impacts. Just Air began as a project to equip environmental justice leaders with the data and tools needed to understand air quality, educate the public, and organize for change. And today, to give Brother Darren respect and also for taking experiences and turning it into an institution, becoming an institution builder. Just Air has developed outcomes-oriented technology that addresses major challenges in air quality and management nationwide. With formal education from Carnegie Mellon University, place I've had the opportunity to be able to present at and to visit when I was younger in my career, and over a decade of experience as a software engineer, Darren leads a mission-driven team dedicated to ensuring that everyone has access to clean air. The title of Darren Riley's presentation is Community Data as Essential Infrastructure: What Wildfire Smoke Taught Us About Preparedness and Local Resilience. Brother Darren, it's a privilege to welcome you. Thank you for your great work and for joining us today. And we look forward to hearing your presentation and having a conversation after that. And everyone in the chat and even the Q&A section, be sure to ask questions and offer attention and support as Darren presents. And we look forward to hearing your presentation and being in conversation with you. We'll turn over the floor to you.
Thank you absolutely. No, thank you. And appreciate everyone for taking the time today. And I know it's towards the end of the day on a Friday. I know it's been a week for me. It's been a week for all of us, just the gravity of this work, environmental justice, health justice, and equities, and things that we all bring to the table. So it's been a blessing just to be present with you all here today and hear some of the conversations. Today's conversation, again, I appreciate the introduction. Today's conversation is kind of a reframing that dawned on me. A lot of things just kind of align and coincidence and kind of paths that are kind of pushed towards. As I was asked to present, it was the same week that we were actually going through some of the wildfire smoke, and it all that combination of environmental health, all the disparities that we see, and all the things around Black bodies, and it really dawned on me how essential our data is, and I'll really double down on that in this conversation. For starters, I want to land right here on this, just to draw back. So I do work in air quality, but the thing I really want to ground us in is what happened here in Detroit, where we're based, and on July 15th. And as you can see on the left, this is kind of in southwest side of town. What you really, I can zoom in a little bit here, is this on the rooftop of this building, there's you can look out to the bridges. There's two bridges here. People are familiar with the area. The Gordie Howe Bridge is over here to the right, and this is the Vassar Bridge right here. You can see these bridges in plain sight every day, typically from this view, and you can't see the Gordie Howe Bridge at all. And this is around 8 o'clock when the wildfire started coming in. Kind of smell it if people are familiar with it. I know a lot of people in the Northeast kind of got wind of it, and here in the Midwest, Minnesota, Ohio, many folks. You can feel it in your nostrils. You can feel it in your lungs, that burning sensation. People's eyes were itchy. And at the same time, that same image, an hour later, I looked at my weather app, and this is what it said the air quality index was, right? The next day, Detroit was said to have ranked the worst air quality in the whole world. Right? And so I want to have that frame because I think that from a citizen and resident experience and people in the community, just on the ground, what I was hearing in the neighborhood is, hey, when is this over with? Can I roll my windows up? It's hot outside. Can we blow this AC, this fan through our door? Should I go for a run right now? Is this a good day should we reschedule this event? The things that I was hearing around this event were really questions of that really drew my attention to people first time experiencing this event, one, but two, not aware of the severity of the impact that it has on our health. Right? I maybe preach to the choir here. We all know that hazardous air, one, is bad for everybody, but especially bad for folks who may be more privy to underlying conditions like COPD, asthma, and all the other health disparity diseases and conditions that plague our community far too often. So I just want to ground us with that. We'll come back to this, but this was an eye opener for me in relation to this work and how communities that are already hit by all different industrial sources like ours kind of get more fuel to the fire, no pun intended, when these climate events and extreme events happen. So a little quick, got a little bit background about myself, but just a quick background of how I got introduced to this work. So as was mentioned, I developed asthma when I moved to Detroit. I'm originally from Houston, Texas. My family is actually from South Carolina. Dr. Williams, I heard you mention that a couple of times, from Beaufort and Charleston. I was born in North Carolina, but moved to Detroit in 2016 after leaving New York for a bit to really explore different professions and things of that nature. And 2 years later, I started having a wheezing sensation. I couldn't sleep. I thought I had like bronchitis, something was going on. Lo and behold, went to the doctor, took some tests, and I had asthma. Mind you, I played basketball all my life, played through college at school, and never had trouble breathing. I was running around. I was a runner kind of guy through all my career, and so it really was a eye opener to like, hey, I'm healthy. I'm an athlete. No one really in my family has these conditions, and it really opened my eyes to like, okay, what's going on here in the zip code? What's going on in this neighborhood? And lo and behold, the zip code that I'm in has some of the highest rates of asthma throughout the state and throughout the country, right? Different genetic codes, same environment, right? And so it really dawned on me when we started Just Air to really the realization that how do we dismantle this fact that our life expectancy, our health, our outcomes are tied to this 5-digit number called a zip code, right? How do we dismantle that? And a lot of the approach has been, one, our experience and many environmental justice mothers and Black women who've been fighting for this work before I was born, sharing those experiences, organizing for this work. What I was experiencing at that time was this friction of my human experience not matching the data that people are making decisions on, right? So I'll go to a neighborhood association and we're talking about, hey, we smell this pollution, we feel this pollution in our bodies. When I moved here, I'm getting headaches. And powers to be saying, oh, look at the data. We don't see that experience showing up in the data set. And it's frustration in itself that we kind of rely on these data practices, which things that we do. But I'll talk a little bit more about that. But that's really what motivated catalyzed Just Air and the work that we do. So today I want to go through, I think, Groundison, what is how does air quality and these environmental challenges really impacting us? Number two, we do a quick briefing for folks who may not be familiar about what is actually a community air quality network and why is it important and how do we actually bring it to life? Three, what happens when we bring it to life? How do we make change? And then we'll come back to the smoke event and kind of the full circle. How does actually really open our eyes to why this data is so essential, right? So for starters, again, I'm preaching to the choir. This is a health crisis, and it does a lot of damage to us, not only from a economic standpoint, but from a life standpoint. Premature deaths, folks being taken away from us too soon, people missing days at school, people missing days at work. Speaking of school, our children, I can only imagine developing asthma as an adult really opened my eyes to folks who I thought was something that you just grew up with and you grew out of from friends who were on my team or people in the neighborhood. But I can't imagine having to focus on my schoolwork with the onset of an acute asthma attack. Like when you have folks who have experienced a traumatic experience of having exaggeration or asthma attack, there's nothing else in this world that you want other than just to breathe again. I can't imagine having to focus in school and having to really do what I'm set here to do, to learn, dealing with some of these conditions. So we see a lot of this show up in absenteeism, and we've talked about it a lot today. But a lot of this work also shows up into all the disparities, the red line, the historic redlining has been from Jim Crow, and also the industrial history of our country, and how these zoning laws have really bear hugged us with emissions and these causes of pollution and emergency visits. So I want to ground us on, like, what is the air quality network? How do we get started and really define that, and some of the principles and learnings that we have. Again, there are a lot of folks who do this work. I saw Dr. Paget here. He's been a huge inspiration for a lot of the things that we do over there at Deep South Center and at Tennessee State. So what is it? It's really a opportunity to distribute instruments, find different methods to ground truth our experiences through data, manage that data, share that data with our community so that we can really enact some change. So I'll go through a couple of these steps that we've seen best practices and some of the tools to allow this to happen. So one thing that I always really ground this work in across the country is starting with a question, less so starting with a goal and objective. I feel like having those questions bring more folks to the table, more discussion. How do we look at different ways to enforce ordinances that our cities say that they have on the books, but have never written a ticket, like fugitive dust or anti-island? How do we make sure that our schools, our places of worship have emergency preparedness when we have an event like fire and smoke, right? How do we share our experiences, our human experiences, our subjective experiences, and qualitative experiences, and also prove that with data to show that, hey, our block of the neighborhood is dealing with a different characteristic of air pollution than the neighborhood across the highway, right? And so starting with that framing of a question really just bring folks to the table to really investigate what an objective could be to really inform how we actually go about our network, right? Choosing how to measure, there's people are probably familiar with purple air and low cost sensors. We use a lot of those tools in our toolbox, but I just want to give a high level overview of thinking of it more holistically as a method of getting air quality data, right? You have one reference method. This is where your regulatory, your air now. So someone put air now in the chat. Your regulatory reference monitors produce data usually at a regional level. It's very sparse. For example, some cities may have one, if any, reference monitors, and we've seen that how that really impacts communities, not knowing how fire and smoke is really impacting a block, or if there's something happening, not having a reference monitor, or it not measuring what is relevant to your community has impacts. A prime example was if you have an SO2 issue or a sulfur dioxide issue, and your reference monitor isn't measuring that, then how do you actually say that the air quality is good, right? We have high quality, we call it high cost instruments, kind of in the middle, that have different tools that are a little bit at a different maturity or a level or high quality instrument. Costs a little bit more than the typical low cost off the shelf sensors. Give you a little bit more data, probably less density. Again, purple air, we have air gradient. There's other instruments that are very low cost. Build your DIY, do it yourself kind of instrumentation that give you some data. I also don't want to, I think oftentimes we forget about other data sources that are around us to tell our experience. One is there's a ton of data from satellites, from NOAA, from a lot of different, the satellites picking up weather data, but also smoke data. Also, there's ways that they're picking up plumes. I'm happy to answer questions around that. Lab sample data, right? How do we actually prove that this pollution came from this source? So lab sample is kind of like our COVID, during COVID, getting that COVID swab and put it in the bag and get a sample to see what the seeing if we have that or not, COVID. Same thing, if I can get some dust material, some heavy metals material, send it to a lab and actually detect what's going on from that event. Most of all, and I wish I made this fun, I wish I made this even bigger, community experience, I think, is the biggest data source that we have. I think I heard someone kind of mention that earlier, I think Dr. Williams, is that our experience, keeping track of that, keeping a journal, logging what we see, what we smell, those human experiences so essential, and making sure that we're logging that and tracking that information. Everyone on our block, did y'all smell that yesterday? How did you feel? Those things are super important to log as well. And I don't think I would love to hear from folks of different ideating or of seeing solutions around that, but it's super important. I'll come back around a little bit later. When you have the data, this is what Just Air really is built for. So when we say we're an environmental tech organization, we build tools and technologies to help this. You always love to work with us, but for this presentation's sake, all I'm trying to get across is that manage your data rather than be an Excel sheet. You get what you have. Make sure that you have data quality, where the locations, how do we keep track of our assets. All this is making sure that we have quality data so that it's defensible. We know where issues are going wrong to, one, showcase what's going on, answer questions accurately, but two, make sure we have the defensible data for that maybe come on the question or greater rigor than other data sets happen to be. But happy to answer more questions around that. One thing that we really specialize in is really how do we integrate all these different methods into one platform, make it super simple so that communities can, our community organizations and our residents can do the work of sharing their experience and not spend so much time bogged down in the data management aspect of the work. And then most of all, which I think is the most important for organizing around this work, is making it accessible. We have our own dashboard. There's data on Air Now. There's data on Purple Air website. One thing that we pride ourselves and focus on is making sure the community data is custom or it's custom in expressing that data set. And we go over and beyond in terms of accessibility, make sure it's translated in Spanish. We have Arabic. We have some other translations coming on. And also people can receive alerts when the air is bad. And we'll come back to this in the fire and smoke. But also we have a tool to allow to customize your own dashboard and send it, put it on your website. The whole point is that people really experience air quality or go to their trusted source and making sure that we have the tools to display that data in real time, right? And then make sure that's accurate. So that kind of summarizes, again, asking those questions, what equipment we should be using to answer these questions. I haven't asked more questions around that. How do we manage our data depending on the method that we choose? And how do we make sure that this data is accessible to create awareness, but also to really build some momentum within our community are really behind our movement. So, and I kind of mentioned a little bit of this. So the biggest part for us and for this work is really around how do we actually use the data? And I get this question often. Okay, we have the data, so now what? I think the big piece of a lot of the work when I first started doing air quality work was, yes, it's a huge win that we got instruments, we got data in the field. We're working through managing it, and now we're seeing a huge shift in the movement. Okay, how do we actually use this for different aspects now? Hopefully, what I share really inspire some ideas for folks who have or thinking about managing air quality data or any other kind of environmental data set. So how I really frame this and always open for feedback is really around how do we, two things. One, in terms of protecting health, how do we, one, reduce exposure, right? Keep people out of harm's way. And two, how do we actually reduce pollution? So those are two pathways at the end of the day that I believe can help mitigate some of the risks that I mentioned at the beginning. On the reduced exposure side, we have behavioral change, right? How do we actually, my grandma would say, like, you know better, you do better. How do we actually get information to people to give them not only awareness, but also tips on what to do when these events or these incidents occur? Number two, environmental change. What can we maneuver and how do we adjust our environment to actually protect ourselves, right? Is that weatherization of our homes, making sure that we do our best to pick the right products in our homes. How do we treat our buildings and our safe spaces as medicine? I think that's going to be a huge thing for resilience, is looking at our buildings and our infrastructure, our places of worship, our schools as places of protection, not just living. And then on the reduced pollution side, this is where a lot of our advocacy work and a lot of our movement building really takes place. How do we make sure that folks are using the best technology to reduce pollution? We're not using old boilers. We're not using old methods of steel or any manufacturing. If they already have an air quality permit, how do we actually make sure that they're using the best technology to do the best they can to be a good steward in the community that may be adjacent because of redlining in the past? And for policy change, how do we correct the things that happened in the past? How do we improve zoning? How do we down zone things that shouldn't have been our industrial zone in the first place? How do we enforce different ordinances that make sure that people are behaving according to the law and actually being good actors in our community? Right. A couple examples of this. I'll start with behavioral change. We do partnership in Dearborn. One big thing in Dearborn is where people are not familiar. It's right outside Detroit. It's like 15 minutes from my house in Detroit, so it's really right next door. But one of the largest Arabic community, if not the largest Arabic community in the Western Hemisphere over here. And there's a lot of let's say surveillance, fear of surveillance, and so when we've done some work in the city and the community there, making sure that we had this information, make sure that we have assets to say, hey, this data, this asset, this technology in your neighborhood is not something that's watching you and tracking you. It's something that's actually useful and helpful and on your side to make sure that you have the information you need to move forward. And this is also a big thing in our communities. We hear all the time about all these different technologies tracking us and surveilling us in our communities and over different gun sensors and cameras that track our license plate, all this stuff. So I think making sure that our communities are hyper aware of what our asset is and making sure that they have the information. And when they have the information in our platform and other places, they get alerts, and you can kind of see some of the feedback that we've gotten, people relying on this data and this granular information, neighborhood level data, to really understand what they're breathing and have a data set that's representing their experience and not at a neighborhood level and not so much a regional level. Right? Some of the things that making it accessible, actually kind of went through this. One thing I'll call out is accessibility to me is, having those workshops, having those convenings in person, sharing, what people are experiencing in the community. One thing also I'll call out is on the right, is an air quality light. So people may be familiar with the flags. We built a thing where we can connect the hue light and change color based on the AQI. We have kids I've heard stories where kids run up to it and like, what is that? They're, why is it yellow? Why is it green? It's a good place to do some passive learning and also a way to incorporate into art. We actually have on East Side Detroit, East Canfield in Detroit, there's I wish I put this picture in there. It's a structure of two African queens representing their crowns, and the crown gem is actually an AQI light that changes color in the face of industry that's facing toward the industrial corridor to really remind people, hey, this is our ground, this is our place, and this is our place of sovereignty. Reducing exposure. We know tree canopy is huge. We have these concrete jungles in our neighborhoods that really exacerbate incidents and pollution. And also now there's studies that show how that catalyzes ozone because of the heat that it gives off. So it's just really a bad mixture. And so how do we cool how do we want to use trees as a barrier, but also use trees as an opportunity to also cool to not further catalyze pollution that's going to put us in harm's way. We think about environmental change. How do we improve our HVAC systems? How do we improve our air filters and purifiers? And making sure that people if there's pollution around us, how do we do our best to mitigate being in harm's way of that? This is some interesting examples. Some tree canopy in Dearborn. This is always a picture that people are familiar. We have an elementary school. It's the wildest thing that you'll see with a steel plant right behind it. It's kids playing on the playground with pollution kind of going on in the background. And how do we actually prevent some of these or mitigate some of these issues? Also, how do we design our corridors to understand how to use this data to be really smart about how to prevent pollution being trapped in our city? So thinking more holistically of how we do public planning and zoning. I'll go really fast on these. I want to get to the kind of the meat of this. Are we tracking on time? Reducing pollution. This is a big one. We've seen folks use the data for advocating for electrification of school buses, right? And using that data. And one of the coolest stories, major stories we did when I first started doing this work, we worked with a high school that actually was a middle school that actually used the data. We had a monitor, a sensor right by the school. And we noticed that when people picked up their kids and dropped off the kids, we had a huge spike in NO2 and PM because of people idling their cars. And we had a really awesome opportunity to educate the students who actually use that to advocate and put signs saying no idling. And we saw a reduction literally in the data just by having our youth be advocates, using the data, learning about their environment, being good stewards, and telling their parents and their bus drivers and their teachers on what you can do to help mitigate pollution that's injuring our school. Sounds like a very small thing, but I was shocked by literally the data. You could see night and day when that campaign started and how people are more informed about reduced pollution. But this is a good example of advocating for and baselining that data for different solutions. This one is major. This was a big moment for us and understanding the value of air quality networks. We have PM. So one thing that we've dealt with is a lot of dust, fugitive dust, and what that means is dust that isn't where it should be. So you have a concrete crusher, you have trucking that's carrying different materials. Those materials flying off trucks or moving outside the bounds of the site in which it was permitted to do, and hitting communities, landing on people's porches, into people's lungs, on people's windows, and on their cars. We have to prove that, right? We have to understand where it's coming from. So we have a network here in Detroit, and we have built a system actually to really, this is a good example where we have a source of an industry, and we really proved over time where this is 6 months of data, I believe, where with enough evidence, high quality data, that when the wind blew from this direction, if you see my cursor, you can't really, it's probably kind of choppy, but from the southwest, kind of towards the northeast, we noticed a spike from the instrument that was just beyond the site. So if you can imagine the pollution dust going when the wind hits, carrying it to the neighborhood and the community and hitting that monitor to be able to express this was really powerful. And so just a couple blocks away, when the wind is blowing that direction, you notice the PM10 values was not that high, but just a block ahead, when the wind, they have the same wind, it's same time of day, same instrument, same quality assurance, different values. That really opened the door for people to further investigate. And Wayne, in the county's council uses data in the storytelling, which is most important, of the community to advocate, to look deeper, and to really understand what's going on with this industry. So still pending on those events, but it's a huge way to use storytelling and also concrete evidence to make sure that our stories are heard and people are going to and take our experiences seriously, which they should do without data, in my opinion. Reducing pollution on policy change. So as I mentioned earlier, trucking route ordinances. How do we make sure that our side of town is not getting a heavy burden or unequal distribution of trucks, having different data practices? How do we inform cumulative impact law and enforce it? How do we actually advocate for down zoning and model out what would happen if we down zone? How many more kids would be in school? How many less people would be in the hospital? What's the extended life expectancy? So having this data and having this information, especially over a long period, really helps to really bring these stories to life. And so I want to come back to this. I'm almost wrapping up here. And sorry if my energy is low. It's been a craziest week, but I feel in community here. I think y'all know what I'm talking about. But I want to just really bring it home here. And go back to the experience of the weather app. And so just to keep it real, like this really frustrated me that I know for a fact in our monitors, and we'll showcase what it looks like, this is a very unhealthy environment. You can smell it, you can feel it, you can see it, and people are relying on weather apps or on antiquated model data because the models are based on climate assumptions that are just not true anymore. Or often not true anymore, because of our climate is changing. And we have these extreme events that are becoming chronic in places where they usually never take place. The big story here too is elder in my community, I was just talking to him, walking down the street, he's like, in my 70 years on this earth, never seen anything like that in my life, right? Like, never seen anything like that. So how do we expect our communities to be ready? How do we expect our communities to be prepared? How do we to take these lessons and learn to make sure that folks who've never experienced this know what to do with this information? And so you can see right here, air quality index is 70, which is similar to yesterday, right? Just an hour after this when it was very unhealthy. And so one thing that we had in this network, which was 3 years prior, is that we have currently one of the largest air quality networks in the region. Huge shout out to County Exec Warren Evans. He's been a huge advocate around how do we build this infrastructure? How do we make sure that communities are aware of this information and we're making policy decisions for tomorrow for our communities? And so we have 100 instruments collecting data across 43 communities, block by block, neighborhood by neighborhood data. And before that, as you can mention, on the east side, we had no reference monitor. On the southwest side, because it's an industrial corridor, this is where I live. We have 5 reference monitors and one, which is pretty decent for a city like Detroit, but many cities may not have any. Our second largest city, Grand Rapids in Michigan, has only 1 reference monitor. So having this data and having it high quality really helped us get an understanding. And thank God that we had this infrastructure, because this is what is possible when you do have it. So what I'm showing you, and this is the kind of watershed moment and why this infrastructure is important. So this, without going too deep into the model, the techniques around it, is that this is an interpolation model. So people may be, instead of having discrete dots that you often see on dashboards, how do you have a smooth surface? And so underneath this layer of Wayne County are those instruments. I think we have 150 in the region, right? And on the left is a forecast that we issued at 12 p.m. Mind you, what I didn't mention is that the forecast issued by our advisory of our state said it could be unhealthy for sensitive groups. So if people are familiar, that's like the orange level, right? So you have green is good, yellow is moderate, orange is a level that's like unhealthy for sensitive groups, so asthmatics, elders, young folks. Then you got unhealthy. I should have that key here. Unhealthy. Then you have very unhealthy. You have hazardous. So we projected our forecast. Everything I'm about to show you is what we forecast, and we update our forecast every hour, which is something that doesn't happen in our current infrastructure. And from the government standpoint, they do forecast 24-hour averages. And so what I should play, but I'll just kind of go through it. So what you'll notice is that we projected that it would come, the smoke would come from the west side of the east side of the county here, and begin to smooth over. And we use our techniques is based in physics of looking at instruments that are upwind, downwind, all the above to track the plume and how fast it's arriving, and also how is it hitting the ground. Super important because our models, just using satellite models, you can't really understand how, if or when or how much pollution actually reaches the surface in which people breathe. There's smoke that just kind of breezes above us, the atmosphere, right? So this is what we said. So we obviously, and this is also the same time of what actually happened. So you have forecast on the 15th and you have actual. On the forecast side, we projected that. We missed it by 2 hours, right? So this is what happened at 8 p.m. It started coming in. And this is the real case right here. And when we said this was fully covered, this is a blessing in disguise because I'd rather people be early than late to get out of harm's way. So people knew that this was happening hours ahead, so they can plan accordingly. People who were experiencing this to get out of harm's way. The big news is, again, what I said earlier. One thing is really interesting is that on the onset, this is the power of having that density. People think of a regional event of impacting one community, but here, what you see, one side of town living in hazardous or very unhealthy, and one side of town being moderate and even good in some places. Right? Until we get to the heavy, so places were hazardous, some places were very unhealthy. Hazardous is this really dark maroon color. This is what we projected. We were off by one on health, one health score. Meanwhile, the advisory that was issued was off by 2, right? That's a major difference. That's a decision point that can literally keep people indoors, keep people out of harm's way, and prevent people from ending up in the hospital. And this is when I dawned on me, like, okay, these networks, this data and community is essential because, one, we are incentivized at a deeper level to protect our communities and do better and create the science and the technology and the information necessary to get out of harm's way. And I use that really strongly as we see what's going on. We have an incentivized culture. We're able to attract people across state lines. We're able to, attempt to send people to Mars. We're able to do all these crazy things with technology because that's how our markets incentivize it. But what about our environmental data, right? We can do way more. Trust me, just in computer science, we can do so much more, and we're kind of showcasing that ability to make sure communities actually have better technology than the infrastructure that is given to us by the public because we're incentivized. One other thing is that we track. We had our highest spike in throughout the event of viewership, subscriptions, and alerts. So we kind of tracked over time the pollution values. You'll see the color change with the graph, but also right here, I'll pause it. You'll notice this spike when we went from very unhealthy to hazardous around in the morning on 16th. We had the largest spike in people viewing our data, getting those alerts to track. People getting alerts, but also checking out the data, seeing what to do something about it. So that was really huge. And then our county responded. There was mass issue. The city of Detroit did a great job. Shout out to Mayor Sheffield. Did a really good job of getting out in front of this, activating our social media resources, and really take this with the seriousness that it deserved. So people were doing our best to respond. And while we could do better, I think it was really powerful just seeing how we were making sure our vulnerable were most protected. And this is an example where Wayne County issued 70K masks that were stockpiled because the stores were empty. People were like looking for the K95 masks and make sure that they were delivered to the places that needed them the most, our senior citizens and also our youth. And the last thing I'll end on is, and this was a lot, and I'm definitely open for questions, but we built this environmental engine that's running every hour based on to understand the characteristics of our climate, because wildfire is one thing where everybody has a heads up, it makes the headlines. What doesn't make the headlines is the things that are happening in our neighborhoods, in our communities every day. And so with this infrastructure and our technology, what we built is a way to automatically characterize these pollution sources. Think about like if people watch like the NBA or any sports, they go back and look at the replay. We can go back and look at that event. What happened? Can we share this with other people? Can we ask people on the block, did y'all see that dust, or was that dust? Was it smoke? We saw something going on here. So we can start to ground truth our information and have a body of evidence based in rooted in data at a time and point to go to really advocate for the change that our communities deserved decades ago. So happy to talk more about this, but the whole core of this is how do we actually use our infrastructure to build evidence that our communities can use. Some of the lessons that we learned is one, making sure we have our materials prepped, make sure we activate our trusted channels. That's so important. Not everyone has social media. Not everybody is reading their email. Not everybody has an app, right? So how do we really make sure that we're taking care of each other and arriving to the moment, especially our most vulnerable groups, and looking out for each other? Staging supplies. What supplies do we actually need to really mitigate this onset of events? If it's a flood, if it's an air quality event, do we have the materials to make sure that we can navigate this? I know we were talking earlier around things I haven't thought about, like if I can get to the store, do I have Pampers for my child, right? Thinking very creatively about this work, right? Also, when an event happens, this is something that when I used to hoop growing up, something my coach always would say is that you'll have off days, you're going things that you can't control, you may get hurt, things like that. We can't control this wildfire. What we can control is how we arrive to the moment. How do we actually take this lesson and actually learn from it? You know better, you do better, and if you don't do better, you better know better. Right? Is making sure that we use these opportunities to look back and take retros. What did we do wrong? How do we do better? What supplies do we need? Who needs to know? Who didn't know? We had people on the beach when we had hazardous air. I saw people running outside. I was walking around and hearing people in the store saying, "I got a headache. You got a headache? I got a headache. I got a headache too." I've never seen that in my life, right? So how do we make sure that people are knowing what's going on and we have the resources to arrive in the moment? And that's the core of the conversation. I think the three things I want to drive home is one, we're here, always here to support. The team has been amazing. This community has been super amazing. The Department of Justice, being able to learn from folks like Bernice Travis Miller, working folks who've been leading the movement. Donnell Wilkins right here in Detroit has been super inspirational and really instrumental in my growth as an individual. And also making sure that our communities have this infrastructure and this data, because again, we're the most incentivized to actually do something about it. So I'll stop there. I see Dr. Williams, you jumped on. I'm sorry about this on a stream of consciousness, but this is my first time kind of going through this kind of storytelling or this process. But yeah, happy we're here and happy to support and share.
No, you're good. Thank you for your presentation, Darren.
Yeah.
And of course, storytelling from a community-centered position and standpoint is the foundation of knowledge creation from the griot tradition to today, and you're certainly in that tradition, and also as an institution builder. So I want to thank you for an insightful and very needed presentation, relevant presentation. And just a couple questions, and if there are those in the chat who have questions, please please place those in the chat. We've gotten some good comments as well from our community resilience director and coordinator Erica Jarvis. Says diversity and outreach is important. And of course, we know earlier that Dr. Pageant said he wanted to tune in and to be here for your presentation as well. So I know he's applauding your work. A couple of questions. One, people say data is the new oil, which, all those metaphors are fascinating and interesting, correlating data with oil. How does that relate to what you say are the lives that are tied to 5 zip codes?
Mm-hmm.
Now, I find it fascinating, and I'll get to my question this way. Yesterday, I had a conversation about startups.
Yeah.
And this relates to the politics of finance and fundraising and the politics of knowledge, which data is the centerpiece of that. both community-based, around the quality of data, as you're saying. And Professor Renee Jones recently wrote, Professor, make sure I get her title right. Thomas Carney, Distinguished Scholar at Boston College Law, just recently wrote a book called Untamed Unicorns: Why Startup Finance is Broken and How to Fix It, where she talks about the Ubers and the Theranoses and the WeWorks and the like, right? And the whole ways in which venture capitalist funding is sort of taking over and is that sort of a wave of moving and engulfing public institutions, who have community-centered data at their interests. And so she talked about also how the whole question of financing oftentimes is more available for a particular few who then become celebrities versus those who are community-centered and community accountable and the like. Which leads me to my question. From your experience and your example, what do we do when the data is not dated? And when there's this question and debate over what data is and where it's from, and the ways in which, as it sort of interrelates with the whole thing of startup finance, capital, environment, toxicity, health disparities, and the like. And what can we do from your experience, from your sort of ontological experience, from how you got started to your experience in leading a very innovative and needed startup community group, community organization.
Yeah, no, I really appreciate you, brother, for bringing that up. It's something this is like I say my like biggest North Star is that I find. Let me start with this. I think I have a fundamental belief about who's incentivized and how are you incentivized. And I'm not trying to wave the capitalist flag or anything like that, but incentivized just in a general sense, right? Some people are incentivized to get tenure. Some people are incentivized to get white paper. Some incentivized to pollute. Some people are incentivized to let them pollute, right? I think across the board it's important to understand how we are incentivized and critique that for ourselves. If we say our mission and vision is this, how do we structure our organization to drive towards that, right? So that's been a key kind of theory of mine and just how I've been experiencing the world. So that's one, and I'll come back to what that is. I think number two, I had this. I grew up around entrepreneurs. A lot of uncles in and out of the prison system, understanding economic pressures that force different decisions. Right, being the first to go to a college institute, understanding how if I grew up with a doctor or someone in this, I probably would have been a researcher, right? And so having these different experiences too, and not seeing imagery on the other side really impacted how I looked at different ways. And the biggest thing is like when we talk about when we look at the Silicon Valley's the startup culture around the world, I call it the tech bro culture in the world, is that they're just trying to get this crazy valuation to exit the community. And I'm really testing, I'm keeping it real right here. I'm stress testing. Can you be incentivized and and led to solve an actual problem as a for-profit organization, right? What I tell our team and investors and board hates to hear this, and it sounds crazy, but just air shouldn't exist, right? How do we build something so pure and so thorough that we lead with those values and really with this problem? It sounds crazy and hairy and ambitious, and how dare you to say something bold like that? Like, yeah, but I truly believe that we can. I think it's fair to capture value if you're delivering value, and when there's no more value, that you should not be. So that's kind of nuanced, but it's something that really comes to me because when I first started Just There at the beginning, everyone was like, "Oh, why don't you go get philanthropy dollars? Oh, why don't you go make a nonprofit?" And I knew because I've seen other nonprofits, and I have friends in the nonprofit sector. There's a lot in Detroit. When the air changed, when the funding thing, we seen it happen. As soon as someone changed office, priorities changed, shift, funding got taken from under. And I didn't want to be beholden to that. I'm like, hey, if we're going to do this sustainably, and which we allow to do, allow us to do stuff for free, we have to do this to a thorough rate and actually add value. So that's a lot, but it's something that I don't have all the answers to. But I think my intentions and how I wake up every day, look in the mirror, That's how I kind of approach
Well, thank you for sharing that perspective and your expertise with relationship to that, with related to that. Your second question deals with the whole, with your work over air quality and an air quality network. How do we look at the politics of air quality today, going from George Floyd and the protests years ago, which seemed like forever,
it. Yeah.
to what we're in now? Where of course the I can't breathe caught on, but it has sort of a broader impact in neighborhoods around air quality, which you and your startup, your nonprofit, your business works in. Can you speak to that and essentially where do we go from here? Where are we going? What's happening next
Yeah,
as
absolutely.
relates to that?
Absolutely. I don't know if you knew this about me. That's crazy you said that. So that same week, it was looking back on it, it was kind of the worst 2 weeks of my adult life or whatever. George Floyd happened, family things were happening, people were transitioning because of COVID. It was funny. I was going to go to business school and I was taking the GMAT test. It's the first time unless you take it at home. And ironically, I was taking the test at home and it was an ice cream truck just sitting outside island playing the thing. I couldn't concentrate. I was going through the worst week of my life. And it's funny you said, because that same night, there was a New York Times article that came out that said air quality correlated with mortality rates of Black communities. That's why Black folks had some of the highest mortality rates with the underlying conditions, and they saw a strong correlation between that and air quality in these regions. But they couldn't really get down to the nitty-gritty, like causation, because of some of the data issues that I referred to. So it's funny you said, because I think and that kind of leads to what the future of this work is. You see what's going on across the country. Is our experience, our data. Let me just actually be real about this. So industry comes in, they just use a model that says, based on assumptions, this is okay to put all these generators, because we're going to assess and permit a generator by generator, not all 300 of these generators together. And what happens when they all go off? We'll just do it one at a time. Right? We're going to model it out. See, we're going to model it out to pass the permit. I'm just keeping it a buck. I think that when we look at our communities, we are smelling, feeling, hearing all of these different issues. And we had to go, my mom would say, we had to work 2 times harder, right? 2 times harder to actually get half the results. So the defensibility that you see that I was sharing with in the presentation, having the quality assurance project plans, like having our license and registration, our insurance ready on the dashboard, right? When you had to have all this evidence, this body of work, not just our story to say that, no, we don't want this here, but have all this evidence is what I think the future of this work, to where it is impenetrable to the point where we're saying we have the ability and have the position of power and the burden of proof to say, okay, now what is your evidence, right? That's really the vision. So I think the quality assurance, having that high quality data is going to be the future for this, because it's not, obviously we've seen time and time again, decades, where our voices and the papers and the work that we're doing may not be enough to stop the permit, but over time, having that data in real time, quality assured to the folks that can make those decisions, I think is super important. So the future of this work is really having that evidence and having it defensible to make it happen. Sorry, I rambled. That's a really passionate subject. It was crazy you said that George Floyd. That's what kind of catalyzed a lot of disparities for me.
Yeah, I mean, part of the movement building is institution building, and do we have institutions such as yours and others that can carry on the work in a sustainable way? Because it's a long struggle, as we've learned from other generations. It's not, a sprint. It's a marathon, and maybe marathons within marathons. So thank you for answering that, and also for work that you do, you and your team does. You mentioned about, last question, zoning laws, and another presenter had talked about land use. I know that's a conversation that's been sort of percolating in Cleveland for quite some time. A land bank, to allocate lands or to allot lands to different groups. And the politics of that, like with most things as it relates to land, which Haki Madhubuti talked about, that's one thing you can't reproduce clean. You know a lot about people, not only how they their relationship to land, but also what kind of books they have in their libraries. How do you see the whole thing of zoning laws and land use with respect to air quality? And what do you sort of project as being opportunities that can be pursued?
Absolutely. I'm glad you asked that. It's all about it's baseline, baseline, baseline. The faster we get this data, the more information we have over time to show the changes of our baseline when an event like a zone change happens for the worse or even sometimes for the better. Because if we have the better, we have opportunity to replicate. Hey, look what y'all did over in Cleveland. Hey, Detroit, can we do this? Hey, Kalamazoo, can we do it now? So that better neighbor effect for sure. So 100%. But I think the key to this is whatever data we have already available to us, let's organize it, let's put it together, let's have that baseline so that we're ready when something changes, when a data center may come to our community, when the next industrial new technology has to come into our community. We say, hold up. You see this where we are now? Yeah, model to the moon what the data will look like. But just know that we have our evidence right here. And tomorrow when you put this in the ground, we also going to have the evidence over there. And so we're gonna write down what you said the model is, but we need to ground truth it into our human experience and our data. So baselining this data as early as possible is super critical for the future of zone changing or any air quality major event in your work. And one thing I do want to share before I forget for the question, one key thing that I think that we can do survive in these times when the funds and the money is low is having a shared infrastructure. One thing that we're very clear, we had our team meeting last week, all teams meeting. I was telling the team is that is our infrastructure getting cheaper now that we have more monitors? Yes. Okay, let's reduce the price. I realized like we don't need to grow our margin. Like the more people who use the infrastructure and share infrastructure, it can get damn near free, you know what I'm saying, or pennies. And I think that's a core thing as we think about our tools and our technology, having a shared infrastructure, not just there, but anything that we're doing, having that shared infrastructure and sharing that cost. One, shares knowledge, but two, also, shares sustainability and togetherness in his work. So that's not a plug for Just Air, but I just want to, just that philosophy, I think is super important for us to share on our community.
And people like to make a lot of the competition between Pistons and the Cavaliers, or between the Browns and the Lions, and that will go on forever, right?
Mhm.
But there are these ties. That's what Ivanka, our executive director, talked about. She said, then it gets political. And,
Mm.
there are ties that Detroit and Cleveland have that go beyond, but also interrelate with sports and politics and other things. So
Yeah.
I'll just leave it at that. I won't go further into that, but I think everybody knows what's going on with that.
Yeah.
And some of the same issues that y'all are facing in Detroit, activists and leaders and academics and all, of course, is happening in Cleveland, also in Lowndes County with Sister Catherine Flowers and others across the country. And so what about when it gets political?
Hmm.
How to keep on keeping on when the data is not dating and when it gets political? Last question.
Yeah. I struggle with this. I don't have the answer to it, but I can tell you how I'm feeling it. I have two fears. Yeah, I think the one is that I realize I've been humbled to realize that you can't stop things from getting political. And maybe I'm wrong on that. And I'd like to live in an idealistic world, but I hate the fact that air quality gets political. I think Dr. Flowers was mentioning Catherine Flowers was mentioning the data center work, and now we're seeing rural country folks damn near about to be on the NAACP call, right? Like things are changing politically, and because of the shared experience. And so I do think the more we can storytell, and Catherine, if you're on this call, thank you so much for doing that. More to storytell of like, this is not just a Black minority problem that the political folks are looking for votes, but this is all of our problem. This is your problem. Your kids not gonna go to school. Air quality has no bounds. It's not like a river and soil. It's not stagnant. When the wind blows this way, it's gonna blow that way. It's gonna go that way. So we're all in this together. I think when we depoliticize that, I think we can get also more power in our movement. And that's just something. It's also good to see where we advocate for all this environmental justice or this air quality, or this policy, and the backlash of that because it's been politicized. So I'm not advocating to make it not politicized. There's power also making it politicized because that also can create things. So I don't have all the answers, and I look for my elders and folks who've been here, done that to really have those answers. But this is what I've been experiencing. Is it frustration? But I think it's just kind of the way of the world.
But thanks so much for sharing that. Again, it's about resilience, and so you and you and your team, and your organization, your startup and your group are doing is epitomizing resilience, as a number of our speakers who present today. So we want to thank you for the work you're doing, for partnering with us, and for presenting for us today. And I think our network and our participants have benefited from your expertise and from your example. And so thank you so much, and much success, continued success to you and your team.
Absolutely. Thank you all so much for joining me. And it's been an amazing event. Appreciate you all. Thanks.
Thank you, brother. Take care, man.
All right. You too.
So everyone, I think we're now at a point to where we will begin to have a sort of concluding session. So I think that comes next, and so we'll take a brief break, real quick, and then we'll come back and give further instructions as to our closing panel, which should be happening soon, and then we'll have a closing to our conference. And we just want to thank everyone for participating. And our event coordinator, Carrington Jones, says we can head over to the next session. So if you're able to do that, let's jump on that call and join that, and kind of conclude and wrap up our sort of our outstanding day, incredible day of speakers and conversation and events. So again.